But this goes hand in hand with that. Michael Ellis on dogs that should not be protection trained.
Yeah.
All right, here we go.
It's not so much channeling. Usually if the dog starts to go backwards, then we'll turn off the pressure and run, or we'll give the dog a bite and quickly bail out and let them win or something like that. That's a warning sign. So if the dog is starting to go backwards, like we're in big trouble. Like that's the opposite response that we want from them in defense, right? So again, defensive expressions can be very forward or very backward, right? So a dog that comes out and I stare at the dog and the dog says, oops, and runs from me, right? Which they're out there. That's coming from the same place as the dog that launches at me and bites me in defensive circumstances. So it's exactly the same place. So what happens is when the dog starts to go away, we need to immediately alleviate stress, right? No, you can't go like, okay, what we hope to do is make the backing stuff go away by giving another response. So what happens is if they're backing up, that means I went too far and I should have alleviated the stress at the first time they showed any kind of aggression towards me, right? So maybe what happens, this is the first thing.
Real quick, just kind of helping people understand this, because unless you know protection dog training, this is going to be complicated. So one way that we train protection dogs, right, is essentially we'll back tie a dog, right? And we'll kind of agitate them a little bit, you know, and teach them that they kind of have control over what we're doing, right? So I'll say you're the dog. I'll kind of stare at you, give you a funny look, you know?
Yeah.
And then you'll go, woof. And I'll like, whoa.
Yeah.
Right? And then, you know, we talked about this with the freaking Tom Davis video, right? And then I'll continue doing that to get the dog to kind of empower them to start reacting to those types of things, right? So what he's saying is dogs that naturally have a flight instinct when they're stressed, you don't want to apply more pressure in those situations. And I'm interpreting here, right? Because that's, a positive response. And two, if you start applying more pressure in those situations, you create a huge liability of a dog that's scared as opposed to confident and then starts biting out of fear, which is not what you want. When you look at like true personal protection dogs, which again, listen to our protection dog episode. I don't condone or recommend really having them, you know, like real ones, right? And also clarifying, Michael Ellis does his protection sport work is, we call it like sport protection work. So the dog is not biting a person. The dog is biting a toy, you know what I mean, basically, right? But if you're tapping into that true fear drive, which some people will do, dog is scared, you continue to agitate until they bite and then reinforce that, you create a liability of a dog that is not in control of their behaviors. They're just acting instinctually off of fear.
Yeah.
So
They have a dog that's not so strong, that has a defensive response, but it's not such a strong defensive response. So it's there, and I start to come towards it like this, and it growls, right? If I keep coming, boom, it takes off. What I should have done is when it growled, I should have gone, whoa, oh, it growls, whoa.
to create the confidence.
And then I come forward again, and now it growls, and I push a little more, and it goes, rah, and then I run, right? So if I push, you don't know. That same dog, I might have kept pushing, and he might have come right out to bite me, too. He growled, and then if I kept pushing, he might have said, come here, sucker, I'll get you. Like, if you come in here, then all right. So, but we don't know if it's not a dog that I've worked. I don't know. So my thing is to give to their first sign initially to be safe. So if the dog's backing up, it meant I went too far. We need to alleviate this stress. So then I run and I reset myself. I make distance further. I do whatever I need to make the dog's response forward so that I can reward a forward response. But I don't have any choice. Ideally, I would not want to reward a backward response, but I don't have a choice at that point. As soon as the dog's backing up, they're telling you they're getting ready to avoid. They may run, right? And if I keep pushing and waiting for a forward response, I may not get it. Now that's where people do table training and other stuff like that. But to me, these dogs that have that much backward response, normally for me, that would be a deal breaker right there. I'll stop working you in protection, period. And that's it. Like, you don't need to. Unless the dog's just a phenomenal prey biter or something outside of that and hasn't seen much defense work, I'm not going to do that, work that dog that way anymore, right? It's basically like, okay, this is not for you.
So he referenced table training, right? So basically table training is what they'll do with more fearful dogs to get more of that defensive drive out of them. So instead of them like on a back tie where they have the ability to turn around and run away, where they're more in control of things, table training is basically they have something like half the size of this table that has like a clip and a harness on it where the dog is stuck in one spot. So you're truly tapping into flight drive, right? And the inability of it to tap into that fight drive, right? So you could take dogs that are really scared and turn them into freaking monsters, right? By doing that. Again, that's not the type of work that he does, though.
Yeah. In my opinion, many people will work that dog. I won't. For the dogs that have a very low and unconfident, a low threshold for defensive stimulation, like I can stare at them and make them feel that way, right? And their kind of courage underneath there, their responses are weak. And I continue to work with that dog. I'm not going to make that dog into a good bite work dog, but I potentially make that dog dangerous, right? Like so I teach them to alleviate stress. So I could take that dog's possible flight responses away from him. I can put him on a table, put him on a short tie against the wall where he can't go anywhere. And I just keep pushing until he finally decides he has no choice but to aggress forward. I alleviate that stress. He wins. Yay, blah, 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 right? So with that dog, then, because he's so low, it's not that he's going to turn from that into a great dog. He's not. I've basically taken the flight response away, and he may bite now, but he's not going to go win competitions and things like that. So now I've taught this dog to bite when he's stressed. When you don't think you can get away from something and it's making you nervous, bite it, and that you'll win. So now I have that dog out in the world. I'm hanging out at the coffee shop, and the homeless guy standing next to me stares at him a little too much, and my dog nails him, right? Oops. And the problem is I didn't turn that dog into a good protection dog. I just made myself a liability. So I taught him, when you're stressed, bite the snot out of somebody, and it'll stop, and that's where it'll stop. So instead of then maybe growling and hackling up and backing away from him, he bites him now, because we taught him that's what you do. Where his normal response would have been to get the hell out of there. So the homeless guy would have stared at him before that a little too much, and the dog would have gone, "Rrr," and you would have gone, hey, knock it off, and you'd have got out of there, and it would have been over. But now the dog sees him and goes, oh, here it is. I got to bite this guy. I don't want him, but I got to. Bam, and he drills the person, right? So those dogs, I don't work. Like, again, before in my early stages, and I can't say that I didn't learn a lot about dog behavior from this, because I did. We made all kinds of dogs bite that had no business biting, right? We did all kinds of not good stuff, right? So in personal protection circles, we did things to get dogs that had no interest in this. And then, and again, none of these dogs turned out to be good at this stuff. You know, and we put them through all kinds of unnecessary stress and the rest of it. So now...
So he's getting at, again, like... And this is where, again, because I originally started learning about a lot of this kind of stuff, I learned quite a bit about when you're working with dogs that are acting aggressively, and you look at the ways that people will train dogs to be more aggressive, you could see the correlation between what people are doing intentionally in these types of camps and what people are doing accidentally in the real world that creates the same response, which then allows you to kind of reverse engineer it and figure out how we then alleviate some of that and, avoid those problems in the first place by setting in place certain rules, right? Number one reason we don't do on-leash greetings is it's the same concept as table training. We're holding the dog on a short leash. Somebody's coming up, agitating the dog, just trying to pet them, obviously, but still to the dog is perceived as agitation in some fearful dog cases. And then because we're not doing this in a controlled fashion, when the dog reacts and barks, the person goes away. That bark gets more intensified. It reinforces that this works and makes people go away. And this is why people think I'm crazy for saying some of this kind of stuff and having these hard rules with types of things. But this is why. It's literally how you train this stuff. You know, it's crazy.
Me, personally, and everybody has their own moral code when it comes to dogs, but for mine, unless the dog really wants to do this, I'm not working it in protection. And we know right away there are plenty of dogs out here. You see puppies here now that are really enjoying themselves. They really want to bite. They want to come out. They want to...
And then one last point. The dogs that are truly enjoying themselves, right, and are truly doing this from a place of just confidence and fun and sport, you don't run as much the risk of creating those negative habits because it's only happening when the dog is in states of joy, right? And we're playing and we're interacting. And sure, they may take that play and interaction a little too far sometimes, but the majority of the time, it's not going to happen unless you're tapping into that fear drive and teaching them what to do when they're stressed and scared.
Stuff. They're into it. They're generally social, confident dogs away from this stuff. That's the dogs that we should be working in protection work, right? Because there are lots of them. And it doesn't mean that there's not some dog out there. There are some that don't show much interest, and you activate them in defense, and suddenly the switch flips, and now they're really into it, and they have good prey drive that they weren't exhibiting before that. That does happen, but it's such an anomaly that it's not worth banking on it. And for everyone that does, there's going to be 1,000 that don't, that you've put through this stress, then didn't turn out to be okay. So it's again like everything I'm saying, right? I'm saying this is a guideline. It's the same thing with dogs. As soon as I say activating dogs purely in defense is never productive, we're gonna go find a dog that it worked beautifully for, right? But that dog is such the exception to the rule that the odds don't make it worthwhile. For me, they don't make it worthwhile. But there is occasionally a dog that activates that way and then channels prey that wouldn't channel prey before you made them. Before you stressed them in defense.
Solid.